Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Inner Game of Food and Diet podcast. Like you know, in my last podcasts, I like to, with this podcast, empower you about your amazing ability of self-healing. You live in this vessel day in and day out, but somehow in time, we lost connection with ourselves. In this podcast, I invite different teachers to talk about different subjects in conversation with me. And today I have Tracey Howes here. And I think it is best, Tracey, when you introduce yourself. Hello and welcome.
Thank you, Paola. It's great to be with you today. So my name is Tracey Howes, and I'm a functional breathwork instructor and a free diver.
Wonderful. So, like we know, breathing is a big part of our inner health. When my mind gets quiet, my breathing starts to slow down and my cells have the chance to expand and healing can take place on a physical level. With that in mind, my first question to you, Tracey, is what with your work do you experience towards people getting more healthy?
Well, I think the most important thing is that to say we obviously all breathe. So it's taken for granted most of the time until something goes wrong. But my approach with the work I do is very much preventative and supportive if people are undergoing clinical issues. And you made a very good point about slowing breathing down. And that's really one of the essential techniques that we use in retraining the breathing muscles to perform efficiently, is employing breathing light, breathing slow, and breathing from the diaphragm. And these techniques can have a powerful impact on the whole body and the mind. So it is very much about understanding what these terms mean and what the sensation in the body feels like so that you improve your self-awareness and can therefore help yourself when you are feeling particularly anxious or stressed, suffering with sleep issues, or dealing with more severe clinical conditions like COPD, COVID, particularly long COVID, asthma. And in the sporting community, you know, breath work is seen as a performance tool. So it can be taken to a completely different level in terms of how we can enable the body to perform more efficiently.
Mm-hmm. When you just said about COVID, it's really interesting. One of my clients with long COVID as well, she actually went into, or I recommended to her to go into an oxygen tank. And the health benefits of going into the oxygen tank is just absolutely amazing, because what we know when we, and I mean, I used to work as a breathing therapist for asthma and cystic fibrosis. What we know is that our breathing helps us to supply oxygen into the most peripheral parts of our body, if it is like down to your fingertips, in your muscles, but also in all the organs. And the other effect what breathing helps us to do is relaxation. And when we think in our body, every organ is hung up on fascias, and when you breathe into the different organs, it helps us to expand and to release all the tension we are holding there. So it's really, really fascinating. Have you got any examples of any clients of yours maybe you want to talk about specifically?
Sure. I think, you know, I have worked with individuals who have had COVID and want to prevent, you know, for example, they haven't have long COVID, but they want to add preventative measures to improve their immunity. And the most important thing to say with breath work is to really understand that we need to use the nose rather than mouth breathing and upper chest breathing, which is where all the real problems start. Naturally, people default to mouth breathing because you think, well, I'm taking in more air. It's a larger surface area. But typically with clients that come to me with COVID or panic disorder, stress, they will be upper chest breathers. They will potentially also have sleeping issues. So they will sleep with their mouth open. They may snore. They may suffer from insomnia or broken sleep. And all of these can be alleviated by closing the mouth and learning how to breathe through the nose. And for many people, this is an unusual way to breathe because they've been mouth breathing most of their life. Or with hormonal change in the body, a lot of women might find that they suddenly have sleep disorders, whereas previously they didn't. So some of the clients I've worked with, we have improved the strength of the respiratory muscles using nasal breathing and diaphragmatic activation, which has improved their immunity and their ability to fight infection. So if they do get sick, the recovery period is shorter. It's not a magic pill so that you don't get sick, but it does improve your body's ability to fight any kind of infection. But more importantly, by retraining the breathing to nasal, you are actually also preventing inflammation of the upper airways. Because what will happen when you breathe through the mouth is you take an unfiltered, bacteria-filled air, and that will exacerbate things like dental issues, gum disease, bad breath, decay, throat issues, bronchial issues. And if these are left unchecked for a long time, if the body is attacked, then you're going to end up with the inflammation and the potential, the lung conditions becoming a lot more severe. Another interesting client observation I had was a gentleman who had a hiatus hernia, and he was on quite a lot of medication. And we started getting him into slow, deep breathing techniques so that with practice over time, they became his default way of breathing. And he eventually was taken off all medication and did not have any more acid reflux or issues with the hiatus hernia affecting his health or causing pain, because he was able to get himself into a relaxed state. His self-awareness improved, and he was able to control his body's reaction to stress a lot better. And the same principle applies to diabetes, to individuals struggling with weight. By practicing slower breathing techniques and improving the respiratory strength, the overarching impact is that the body does not need food as much, for example. And it's also better because the blood is able to balance the pH, and therefore the blood sugars are lessened. So that also impacts people who have particularly type 2 diabetes.
It helps with overall hormones as well, hormone levels and stuff to regulate them. My next question is to you, and I bet I want to ask that for all the people out there, because I bet a lot of people, when you talk about nasal breathing, have that question. What do you do when you have a blocked nose?
Good question. We have a nose on blocking technique, which is very helpful. Typically, and it may sound counterintuitive, but actually by holding your breath, you are able to improve the production of a molecule in the sinus cavity called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide, like carbon dioxide, is a vasodilator. So it will expand and relax the blood vessels, which allows more oxygen-rich blood to get to the lungs. And through breathing techniques where we incorporate breath hold, most of my clients will say, oh, I can breathe again. I can feel the space opening. And that's because of this particular molecule, which does not activate if you breathe through your mouth. So it's really important to rethink what we think is day-to-day good breathing habits, because it's not what people think it is.
No, not at all. So you got a link to that? Maybe we could add that to the YouTube video. You got a link where there is a technique. Have you got a video about that? Or
I personally don't have a video, but if you want me to find a link for you, I can.
Well, if not, get in touch with Tracey, and she can give you the link, or get in touch with me and I get in touch with Tracey and we can pass that on to you. So coming to awareness, because I find that in my work a really interesting subject with awareness and breathing. So it's a little bit like the chicken and the egg thing, but I just know from the understanding of how my mind works that as soon as my mind gets quiet, my breathing starts to slow down. As I can sit and my breathing is very fast, and I have, for example, some anxiety or some fear going on, and I try to slow down, my breathing can help to bring me back into the moment. But also it is when I'm sitting and I try to slow down my breathing and I try to calm my mind, but as long as I'm still thinking about future events, my breathing probably will slow down for a little bit and then it will rise again, because I'm still coming back into that moment, thinking about what is going to happen in the future, or my anxiety, fear, whatever it is. I find that still very, very helpful when we concentrate on the breathing side of things, when you have anxiety or fear, and I can put my hand on my chest and I can, or even on my tummy, because then our breathing goes even deeper. And I also find that in meditation, when you sit in meditation, so I just tried to practice that this morning because I didn't know we're going to have a podcast today. So I was sitting there in my meditation, and when you sit in the meditation, or when I was sitting in the meditation, my breathing gets really quiet, but I wouldn't say that my breathing goes really deep. To have the awareness of that breathing goes far deeper than most of us think, because like you said before, it often stops in your chest, and most of us actually don't breathe down. It's actually really interesting. What comes into mind there is as well, a doctor once told me that apparently they can often hear when they go with a stethoscope on the lungs and they ask people to breathe in deeply, what they actually find is that they hear a pop, because people are breathing so shallow. So when the doctor is asking them to breathe into the sides and into the abdomen, that they can actually hear a pop, how your alveoles suddenly start to expand, and how they were constricted and they start to expand, and that pop they can actually hear. But coming to that awareness, that breathing can really help us with that. Have you got any more to say to that?
In terms of meditation, for example, I find, particularly with the clients that come to me, they are aware of meditation, but maybe have never practiced it, or it feels like a very abstract concept for most people, because they immediately will assume I have to sit in a quiet room and sit with my thoughts, which is terrifying for a lot of people. So for me, I always say we start with the breath, because the breath is tangible. You can feel it, you can hear it, you can sense it in the body. And everybody's awareness of self is different. And the breath is a very comfortable place to start, because of as I said, it's something you can really feel. And naturally what will happen is when the breath slows down, And you will, through techniques that we practice, to get people into a meditative state, because that's essentially what we're doing, is we're taking someone from maybe a stressed, anxious state of mind and body into a calm, relaxed state. So shifting them from, within the nervous system, sympathetic to parasympathetic. The sense of feeling relaxed is powerful enough that the body will want to do that again and again. So it is a repetitive practice, but it helps when you are taken with somebody on that journey and not have to just suddenly figure out how to do it on your own. And I would say pretty much in all cases with the individuals I work with, particularly if they are high performers or dealing with whatever might cause stress in the body. And, this stress is not always negative. It can be positive as well, particularly in sports performance. But for the vast majority of us, we associate stress and anxiety with feeling low, feeling down, sort of the weight of the world on your shoulders. But the breath is the conduit to shift us. And it takes quite a lot of, determination for people to go, okay, I'm prepared to take that journey. And often people will come to me when they are at the end of their tether. They just have no other choice and they have to do something, and they think, well, this has to work. But what we discover in the process is that those who thought they could never achieve that state of mind and body are able to, with the breath, with the techniques, with support. And as soon as they are able to do that on their own, that is a very empowering sensation in the body. And it allows us to realize that we can actually enable ourselves. And I know that's very important to what you teach as well, is looking in. But if you've never done it before, you need some support in how to do that. I can only speak for myself in this regard, but when I started meditating several years ago, I struggled. My head was just full of thoughts. I didn't understand how to manage it. It was just overwhelming, and then you stop. You don't do it. But finding a practice, finding people who understand how to help you through that process is really essential, I think, in many cases. And sometimes, yes, of course, we have apps to help with that, recordings. I do believe we all have the power to do that, because once you are able to tap into that source using the breath, then the deeper work can happen.
I think it's a very good tool. I think breathing is the most powerful tool, really, to get you into that awareness. What comes to mind is when I still worked as a physiotherapist, and I had a little child. He was 3 years old, and he was tetraplegic. He had a birth defect, and only his certain senses were still active. And he was in high tension all the time. He had his high spastics. And what I did, it probably wouldn't be allowed today to do that actually anymore, is I was first putting him on a roll to release all the tension he was holding. And then I found it actually didn't work to release his spastics. And so I lie him on top of me. And I adjusted my breathing. So I really was breathing really, really slowly in and out. And our breathing started to align. So I could feel that his breathing started to align with my breathing. And in half an hour time, he was completely, utterly relaxed. So I think we underestimate the power breathing has on our physical health and also on our mind. And like I always say, for me, mind comes first. When my mind starts to slow down, then the breathing slows down. But also when we are not connected with ourselves, breathing is, like you just said, an amazing tool to get us in tune with ourselves and start to connect with ourselves. And that brings me to my next question. Like you heard in the beginning, Tracey is also a deep sea diver. And I just would like to know what your experience, your personal experience is with that, since you do deep sea diving with your breath work. Because I think, as I understood it, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that actually the deep sea diving brought you to the work you're doing today?
It was a bit of both, really. So I was a scuba diver for a long time, but I never really felt very comfortable with all the equipment. And I, as a child, had always felt very comfortable underwater. I'd sit, hold my breath and sit at the bottom of the swimming pool for as long as I could, much to my mother's concern. Just worrying about what is going on there.
Oh, she's never coming up again.
Never coming back up again. But it was, water's always been a comfortable space for me, which is the most important thing, because if you feel claustrophobic or that you wouldn't be able to really relax at all. And so I started looking at breath work firstly for my own personal health about 5 years ago. And I discovered that learning how to use different breathing techniques was hugely beneficial to handle anxiety in particular, sleep issues. And meditation was part of that process and learning. And that opened my eyes to the possibilities. And then I started free diving, which was all about breath hold without the use of apparatus. And obviously there's a lot of overlap between learning how to control anxiety and stress combined with breath hold when you put yourself underwater. Immediately a lot of people might think that's just way out there. That sounds like the most stressful thing anybody could do. Why would you do that? But for somebody who loves water, who likes being under the water, part of learning how to control the breath is basically learning how to control your stress response. Because if you are relaxed and you are almost in a meditative state, and there's been now research studies where they've done brain scans of free divers doing extended breath holds, that we are able to move from the high alert phase, which is beta, into alpha, which is almost just before deep sleep, but still aware. And that's where you can also, you in a meditative state in that same brainwave. I can't think of the word, but it basically proves the point that when your body is in that state of relaxation, the breath hold actually enables the body to relax a lot more. You're able to go deeper. Clearly, you need equalization techniques because you can't just jump in and drop down. You need to learn how to equalize your ears, manage your breath hold so that you don't injure the body. But the fact that we as mammals have the ability to do this to a lesser extent than a dolphin or a whale or a seal, but we have this mammalian dive reflex, which we can activate through breath hold in water, is always fascinated me. So being able to take something that I love, which is water, playing in water, combining it with the breath hold and using meditation and techniques to ensure that I can hold my breath longer, was really a gift. I see it as a gift because it's something I greatly enjoy. And I think my clients quite like hearing all of my stories as well. But yes, it's most certainly another way to show how the body can perform in what would be considered a stressful space, but actually you switch it over to a complete state of relaxation and you can have the most incredible experiences underwater and interacting with marine life because there's no bubbles from the scuba gear. And just feeling very present and at one with your environment. And in that respect, to me, that is extremely powerful and, something that I very much enjoy.
That sounds really beautiful. And for me, the question is, how did it change your life outside of the water?
It's a great question, because I think most people who learn to free dive through a certified process, suddenly their mind is open to what is possible out of the water too. I know people who have literally changed their lives once they have experienced free diving in a safe, controlled way, because they've learned so much about what they are capable of.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a certain amount of bravery, I would say, with yourself and trust, knowing that you are able to do this with the support and training you've had, so that when you are out of the water, you can be brave in other parts of your life. You might think, well, there's no reason why I can't do this because I've just done that.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that hugely empowering, because it's, I guess, a gift that keeps on giving. The more you can challenge yourself internally and learn from that, can only add benefit to the rest of your life.
So, but you were saying through the breathing, you get into that meditative stage. You slow your breathing down. You get into that meditative stage. You're really present. So you're really present with your surrounding. You are one with your surrounding. When you go down there, that's a very special feeling, and you can have that also in your everyday life. Outside of the water. So do you find through this exercise, or through the training you're doing, that you also come into that meditative state more likely in everyday life?
I definitely have my response or reaction to stress is more measured. I think I have, when I meditate, I'm able to move into a meditative state a lot quicker, because I've practiced. So if I sit down and I'm doing my meditation, which is my 20 minutes or an hour, whatever I'm doing that day, I can drop into that space very quickly because I've done it so much. But for, dealing with day-to-day stress, and this is where we really see the benefit of breath work, because by using breath hold and correct breathing techniques, by regulating and improving your tolerance to CO2, your body or your nervous system becomes less reactive. So less reason for inflammation, less reason for infection. You are able to literally take a mirror and look at yourself and go, I recognize the sensation and I know how to counteract that. Nobody's perfect. Of course, we're going to get stressed. It's not about stopping that. It's just about having a tool to manage it better, so that we don't impact our health as much as we do without it. Because that underlying ongoing stress that people feel, if it's never addressed, it manifests in ill health.
But the thing is, and that's where I come in from, my angle of looking at our life and ourselves, is when you go into the water and you maybe have a moment where something happened in your life. In that moment when you decide you're going in the water, you bring yourself into that state, into that mental state, where your breathing starts to slow down, you're coming back into that present moment, you're getting really focused. And for you, it's a technique to do that. But also, when I know how my moment-to-moment experience is created, that I live in a thought-created reality, I know in that moment now for you, where you sit on the edge of that water before you go in, you know and you don't know, there is only this moment right now. I don't need to think about anything else in that moment. There is only this happening in this moment right now. And that's exactly when I understand how my mind works, that I'm always present, and my past is 2 seconds away. The future is an incomplete equation. In that moment, my mind quiets down, and I don't need to listen to anything else, and I am present. And that's when my breathing starts to slow down. And in that case where you were, you're able to go down. And then I don't it's good to have techniques and use these techniques, because otherwise you couldn't go diving. And also it's really good to have the techniques of breathing and to getting you to that point. But it's a little bit, like I said, the chicken and the egg thing, because it's all mind is taking us where we are in that moment. Because without the thought coming in, oh, look, there's something else, there's somewhere else to take me to get peace in that moment, I could do that breathing technique or whatever it is, I wouldn't get there. And that is really an important part to see. So techniques are really, really important. And sometimes, like you said as well before, it is a good tool when I'm completely disconnected to myself to get me there, but also when I understand of how my moment-to-moment experience is created, then these tools are a tool to help me to get there. But also I understand how my mind works, and taking me back into that moment, because I know there is only this moment right now.
Yeah, I agree. I have nothing to add to that.
Yes, no. So how can people get hold of you?
Well, I'm in the process of building a new website. So I will give you my Linktree link to add to the video notes,
Please.
which will take people to a lot of videos, talks that I've done on sleep, anxiety, sports performance, women's health, as well as the option to get in contact with me directly to find out about my programs, my taster sessions, my live retreats, or just to ask a question. Very happy to help.
Wonderful. And I know Tracey's work is absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much for listening today, and get in touch with us anytime. We'd love to hear from you. Bye.
Thanks, Paola.